What's going on, you guys? We are currently waiting for this campfire chat to start because, just like you all, I am very curious to see what they say about their decisions to completely destroy our hundreds of hours of work that we put into our characters and make them absolutely useless. So, um, thankfully, my main character didn't get wrecked that bad, but there's a lot of people complaining about it. So yeah, we're just kind of seeing what's gonna happen. Starting soon, should be starting very soon actually. It's 2:04, so leave my commentary on it. All right, here we go.
I am writing to you because although a great evil is receding from Sanctuary, a new festering curse now spreads its corruption across the land. More dangerous, more malignant than I could have imagined. I have found a way to stop this plague, to rip the dark power of these monsters from their very core and turn it to our advantage in destroying them. But I cannot do this alone. My allies have fallen. My strength is dwindling. The malignant are relentless and without mercy. I need help. I need you.
I need you all to fix it.
Hello, Diablo community. Welcome to another Diablo 4 Campfire chat. My name is Adam Fletcher. I am the Associate Director of Community here for Diablo. I'm joined here by Joe Shelley, Game Director of Diablo 4, and Mr. Joe Pipora, the Associate Game Director for Diablo 4.
They don't look
we have a
very
lot
happy.
to talk about today. Obviously, we have this Campfire chat because we do want to talk about
Look at the frown on him, and look at they do not look happy.
the patch that just released this past week, which is patch 1.10. We've seen a ton of feedback. We've heard a lot of feedback. And so we do want to go through, a lot of the points of feedback that we've been hearing and at the same time, the patch itself. The biggest thing that, to kind of like kick us off here, I think we want to, obviously acknowledge everyone's feedback in regards to reducing player power. We know it is bad. We know it is not fun, and it's something that we ourselves know that it's not the greatest play experience for players out there.
No, it's not.
We do want to explain why we ended up doing it within the actual patch, and then of course we also want to talk about like what we were trying to achieve specifically with this patch and with.
I'm sure it wasn't to piss off like 100 million people, or not that many, but however many people play this game.
With the changes that players ended up seeing. And then separately, we do want to also talk about how we don't plan on doing a patch like this ever again. We have most definitely heard the feedback from the players on
I'm sorry, that's just funny. Oh my god.
that front. And we do want to talk a little bit about our philosophy, our own internal statements that we're setting for ourselves for future updates for the game itself. And then, of course, we do want to also talk about how we can talk better and communicate with the community better in regards to patches and updates coming to the game and what we can do to improve on that. So I know that the first thing we do want to talk about, though, as I said, was talking about, why we ended up doing this in this patch. And I do want to throw it over to.
Let's hope that at the end of this video or sometime they say that, hey, we're going to put a hot fix in here and remove all the crap that we destroy Draw's characters with. Let's hope that that happens, because that would be their smartest move at all.
Mr. Joe Pipora over here to talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. So I know that we've talked on stream before about our intentions for Diablo 4 being a game about choice. And part of that is ensuring that the various class options feel that they've got a place in the meta experience. And that kind of goes to some of the changes we made in 1.1. Now, Adam already called out that we've heard the feedback with regard to the patch, and we know that reducing player power is never a good experience in general. And I want to talk through like sort of some of the things that brought us to where we are today in terms of decisions we were making and why. So, a few of the really big changes that were made as part of 1.1. First, really, I guess, to cooldown reduction. We changed the amount of CDR that players can get as part of in the affix ranges and items that are rolling for them as they're going through the experience. CDR is one of the, if not the most powerful stat in many ways in Diablo 4. And the reason for it is obvious. When you're able to get CDR to a certain point, when using certain class mechanisms, you're able to get effectively like instantaneous like active skills. So like, that can give you like unlimited resource, it can give you unlimited movement speed, give you unlimited damage resist, and it begins to dwarf the effectiveness of other options when you can start trying to take these things into account. Now, we know that blasting through content with those things is really fun, so it feels really, really painful to have to take some of those things away. And we certainly don't relish the idea. That was the
Okay, first of all, Diablo is a hack and slash style game. You go in there, you chop stuff up, and you keep on going. I mean, it's just how it goes. This is not World of Warcraft. This isn't something where you wait a week and then you do another boss again. You do it over and over and over and over and over. You can reset it infinitely if you want to. So why slow down that process? It makes absolutely zero sense at all. I mean, I understand where he's coming from, but that to me sounds like a World of Warcraft talk and not a Diablo playstyle type of talk.
The original thinking for these sorts of bits. One of the reasons why we think that these builds are very prevalent at the moment is based upon like the nature of some of the endgame content we have in Diablo 4. In particular, thinking about Nightmare Dungeons, especially. The reality is that Nightmare Dungeons are dramatically overtuned from where they actually need to be based upon the place they fill in the role they fill in the game itself. So tier 100 Nightmare Dungeons are excruciatingly difficult for most players most classes to be able to actually get through. And as a result, it begins to kind of winnow the opportunities and options that players have when they begin to engage with content at that tier, such that you really do you need to lean on very, very specific builds, very specific setups, with access to things like near instantaneous cooldowns for some skills in an effort to actually like make it through those spaces. And that was never really the intent of that content. And we see that, right? Players are using Nightmare Dungeons as ways to kind of like level up their glyphs, ways for them to gain experience and loot as they're progressing up. It's largely like a level up system that you're progressing with once you get into.
Which we might add that the loot sucks. It's very annoying to be playing a certain character class and you keep on getting the same freaking loot that you get all day long. That does not apply to your class, to your specific, the set of skills, your skill set that you picked. So everybody has like, 4 different sets of skills that they can randomize in multiple ways. So when you pick up an item and it gives you, like, if you're a rogue, for instance, like my top character is a rogue, and I have my Twisting Blades option. Okay, well, when I pick up nothing but Penetrating Shot and Flurry and everything else, nothing for Twisting Blades, nothing for attributes and stuff that I get for Twisting Blades, it'd be nice if we actually could get that at least a couple times a day and never get it. So, and that's not just the rogue, that's every single character. Diablo's kind of always been like that, but it's just so dialed down on this one, it's annoying.
To world tiers 3 and 4. But they've taken on an outsized role as sort of this new endgame chase opportunity for players who are looking to really challenge themselves. And we love that we want that kind of content and we want that experience for those players. And we feel like we have done a reasonably good job of that with Uber Lilith in the game. But we don't feel that like tier 100 Nightmare Dungeons fulfill the same role at all. Just the nature of the content type doesn't actually work well as that kind of pushing opportunity. So one thing we actually plan on doing, and we'd hope to get out as part of this release, we're going to get out very, very soon, is we're making a reduction in the difficulty of some aspects of Nightmare Dungeons to kind of retune some things. And the goal here is
You don't need to make it less difficult. You need to not take away our ability to survive. There's a big difference. Not like hacking on this guy or nothing like that, but again, I can understand where he's coming from, but I don't feel like he's thinking on the right side of the spectrum here. It's like I said before, it's a hack and slash game. That is the type of game Diablo is. You go in there, you hack it up, and you keep going. Sometimes you, I think used to you can get like combo points like massacre and all that stuff, which I'm not sure if it's still in this one or not. But like for killing all these monsters, so survivability for us is where it's at. Don't make it less difficult in the end, because that's the whole point of getting good gear. That makes you strive for more gear, is to get to the harder stuff in the game. Don't make it less difficult. Make us better. Like help us out. Like give us the stuff that we need to succeed. Don't rip it from us and then make the game sissified. That's kind of destroying it, in my opinion.
to say that we think that that's roughly where you are with like a Nightmare Dungeon tier 70. That's kind of where we actually want the difficulty to be for a tier 100 as players are going through the experience. So there's still a thing to push for, but it's more reasonable. And as part of this exchange, we know that players really like kind of blasting and pushing hard for these sorts of things. They feel like big achievements. We are going to be looking at creating a new content type, a new endgame content type that's going to be more directly meant to address those sorts of players and give people more things to chase. That's part of the commitment to the live services, to make sure that we're always adding new things like this for players to go and try to kind of chase after, to kind of maximize and use their builds in fun and interesting ways. So that's another really big thing. Next, we made a number of changes to the to sorceress skill, sorceress builds in general. That sort of ended up having a net impact of like really reducing their effectiveness with some of their most powerful builds at the moment. And the goal at the time was to try to bring their builds back in line with one another, so that we could start trying to bring everything up at once, as opposed to having these things as they are. And this actually leads to a really good conversation about the idea of balance in general. I said before that Diablo 4 is a game that is about choice, and that remains our goal. That's our guiding light. We're trying.
So if it's a game about choice, then can we have the choice to remove the negative parts of this patch? Because when we first seen the notes of this patch, it was very exciting. They told us about stuff that was going to happen, stuff we were going to get. What they left out was all the negative crap that they were going to do. So it'd be fantastic if they gave us the choice. Hey, let's have a vote. Give us a vote. What would the community like? I'm not saying buff us to the extreme. I'm just saying remove the negative impact that you took on this patch, or that you added on this patch, because it's such a negative impact. It's unreal.
Trying to make decisions on balance and design in general. And sometimes we don't always get it quite right, and I think that we see that with some builds that are just simply not performing to the level they need to be, because they just don't have the right interactions with the kind of content or skills that you actually really want to use to get through the game. This is an example of like when we're thinking about our goals in terms of creating this balanced experience where there's lots of interesting choices for players to engage with. We cannot make balanced decisions without kind of accounting for the way that players are going to feel about those things who are playing those classes. Like if our goal is to create an ultimately balanced experience, without regard for how much fun the player's having as part of that exchange, that's ultimately that would be like a failure on our part to not kind of think about things. So we have plans that I know that we're going to talk about a little bit later, so they kind of address this more clearly. But understand that we've heard this, and we have plans in the very near future to address these sorts of things. Another bit that speaks to this is the change that was made for vulnerable damage. Now, I think that there are a lot of players in the community who like kind of dove deep into a lot of our systems in Diablo 4 and kind of see that.
I can tell you right now that as far as the vulnerable damage goes, yes, it hurt. Again, on my rogue, and y'all feel free to check out the video on my channel for that rogue build, my last one up. I focused heavily on vulnerable damage because the primary attack that I have, I don't remember the specific name of it, but anyway, it instantly makes any enemies that it attacks vulnerable. That way, you're doing just that much extra damage. So for them to just destroy that, it's just like, what the? Why did you do that? So anyway.
That vulnerable damage is a really outsized role that it plays in terms of a lot of build making, and to the point where it feels that you'll get to certain parts of content and creatures sort of need to be vulnerable in order for you to feel that you need to that you can damage them. This is something that we're very aware of, and we made a reduction as part of the 1.1 build that reduced player damage in general because most players rely on many builds, I should say, rely on vulnerable damage to deal to kind of spike in lots of different kinds of content. This is something we also need to talk about. Vulnerable damage is far more potent right now than we actually want it to be in general across the game. I think I've talked about this before. And we need to make a number of, we need to kind of bring these things back in line. But this is a more complicated conversation than simply just saying we can take a bonus damage to vulnerable creatures number and reduce it by 40% in terms of the the amount of damage you can accrue across different sources, and have that be the way that we solve this problem. Really, I think we all know that the ultimate problem with damage to vulnerable creatures, the fact is multiplicative stacking on top of the base vulnerable damage, which is already multiplicative on its own. Like this is the reason why the stat plays such an outsized role in a lot of player builds. We're going to need to move that to an additive place, but we can't do that without making a number of other adjustments to critical strike damage, to the way that overpowered damage is both calculated and dealt to creatures, and the availability of these things across various builds. There's lots of builds that rely on vulnerable, and they're balanced around the idea that the damage is also multiplicative. So a number of their balance and tuning changes will need to be made in order to be able to bring vulnerable back in line with some of the other options we have out there. So this is how we're kind of thinking about these things moving forward. We want to start trying to be a little more inclusive of all of these decisions when we begin considering which of these balance adjustments we want to make, rather than being in this iterative place where we're making small adjustments to a number of different things along the way with an end goal in mind of where we actually eventually want to be. We want to be trying to consider what the experience is going to be like from moment to moment, rather from update to update and release to release, to get things in a better spot. So while we do believe that having our season roll gives us the opportunity to kind of reset our meta and change a lot of things, that obviously has an impact on internal players, the way that they kind of perceive the characters they're still playing in that space, and it can be disruptive for players who found a particular playstyle that they're really excited about. So so I know that Joe, you're going to talk about some of these things in a minute. So this is an awkward handoff, but I just want to make it right. It's a very awkward handoff. Okay. I'm sorry, but I want people to understand that we do hear the things that they're saying. We do plan on making changes in the near future, and just kind of thinking philosophically about how we want to address these things moving forward.
Change now, not in the near future.
And with that, I guess Joe, would you like to chat about your thinking?
Yeah. So I think it's a great point. A great lead in here. We want, as Adam mentioned, we want to talk about, we kind of talked a little bit about how we got here. We want to talk about what we're going to do about that. I mean, I think one of the really good points you made is like, vulnerable is, for example, vulnerable is like a must-take stat, right? And it would be better if it wasn't a must-take stat.
But more of a build option.
The game will be better when that's the case. Mm-hmm. But if along the way to...
Well, if that's the case, then... if it's not a must-take stat, then why did they originally design the game with all these skills for vulnerable damage? Like, are you just going to redesign everyone's character? I mean, how's this going to work? People have got hundreds of hours into this game already. Not as a whole. I'm talking about individual people have got hundreds of hours into this game already. And in one go, overnight, boom, destroyed it. I just spit all over the place. Just destroyed it. So, okay.
Getting to that, the game is less fun, then we're not fulfilling our obligation to players, right?
That's right.
So I want to talk about our mission statement for the live game, And I think we have
Oh,
yeah, perfect. So there are four parts to this. We're going to start with the first part. We want the live game to always have a wide variety of viable builds to discover, to put together, to acquire the items for, and to optimize across all 5 of our classes. Second point, every season should introduce new items and powers that keep the game fresh and increase build variety. Moving on to the third point, the live game should also have continually evolving end game content. And that content needs to have high monster density for powerful builds to mow down, and it needs to have activities that challenge your build. And you were just talking about how while Nightmare Dungeons, I'll get to the fourth point in a second.
Okay, before we get to this last point, okay, so a wide variety of viable builds to discover, put together, and optimize across all 5 classes. Okay, fine. If they would have made them actually equal to begin with, which obviously did not happen. They've realized this, and that's why they're trying to do all this, but they're just doing it in the incorrect way. That's why Ice Shard's Sorceress is like the most powerful build out there, because you take her against like a fire sorceress and there's just no competition. Not really. New items and powers every season to keep the game fresh and increase build variety. It would be nice if when they introduced new items and power, well, specifically the items, if it didn't have attributes on the item that pertained to one specific build on the class. So let's say you're running a druid and now you're just picking up stuff that's nothing but for like a werebear druid or something of the sort. Okay, this applies to all classes, but I'm just using an example again. It'd be really nice if whatever items that you picked up could apply to anything that you want to build in that class. There's your options. That's giving players the options, not forcing players to pick one or the other. So another just thought there. Continually evolving. Okay, let's just end the rest of that sentence. Continually evolving. Evolve the game. By destroying what we currently have now from this patch, that is quite literally taking away from what our characters are capable of. There's no evolution of that. There's no evolving that. You've not evolved it. You've made everything just so much worse now. So, yeah, continually evolving. You want to go by your mission statement? Well, then go by your mission statement. Fix it. Don't degrade our characters. Don't make us feel like we have just wasted so much time on this game. I literally took a vacation to play this game. And I spent 14 to 16 hours a day playing. And then this happens. It's unreal. And make the game fun for more players. Yeah, we all want that. So why did you destroy it? Okay, enough. Let's let him go on.
While Nightmare Dungeons are technically challenging your build, they're challenging your build in some ways that are not very fun, right?
Yep.
Like being CC'd all the time.
Yes, that's correct.
And
that I agree with. Between the smoke, the darkness and stuff like that, constantly being froze all the time, that is very, very aggravating. So that's probably the first point that they've mentioned so far that I can totally agree with. That sucks.
Went through 20 tiers of Nightmare Dungeons where every monster can one-shot you, and then if you get clipped by one bit of chill, you're permanently snared, right? Or not completely frozen. Like these are not things that the Nightmare Dungeons system is doing particularly well right now in terms of making challenging content.
right.
Yeah.
So I think that's why it's so important, your call out that we plan to introduce additional content that fulfills that part of the mission statement to challenge your builds. If we can go back to the screen, I got kind of sidetracked, but I think it was really important.
Yeah.
And of course, ultimately what we're trying to do is make the game more fun for players, right? Players are at the heart of everything that we're doing. And if the game is not more fun
That's all I have to say. Fail. It's still a fun game, but it is not as fun as it was a minute ago.
for players, and we're not making the game, if players can't believe that as the game evolves, it will get more fun, then we're not accomplishing our goals either, right? And so the other point I want to go to here is a change that, Adam was talking about. How do we make sure that the next time we do a patch, we don't have, this doesn't happen, right?
Yep.
And so I want to talk about we call it a key process improvement. That's like a weird jargon term, a change that we're making that will help us avoid this situation. So I think we have a slide for this. When we make, and this goes, again, this is right along what you were saying here. When we make changes to increase build diversity, our goal, going back to the mission statement, is we want to have a wide variety of viable builds, right? So when we make changes that have the ultimate aim of increasing build diversity, we need to pair those changes with compelling alternatives. And that means that there are some builds that'll be overpowered. And we can't nerf those overpowered builds without providing compelling alternatives for players to pursue.
Which obviously they didn't do. They didn't make enough alternatives right now to make it compelling, and that's one thing that people have been really complaining about. But a moment ago, they just said that they wanted everything to be balanced and everything be equal. But they're clearly saying that some are overpowered, and it's meant to be like, it has to be like that. So I don't get it.
That's right. It means that things like when we identify that there are a few individual like meta builds or stats that are like really, really powerful within preseason or within a season, that until we have created those other options and redesigned things around the nature of these and made sure that we've lifted up other options and brought everything in line, we're not going to move on those changes. There's going to be always situations where there are extraordinary outliers, that we're going to want. They're usually relying on like actual bugs that we need to address. But when it comes to like trying to bring things back in line with one another, we want to be able to make sure that we're doing those. When we make those decisions, we have a bevy of other options and alternatives available for players to engage with at the same time. So if players see just taking like a toy away, that we're giving them lots of other toys or lifting up other toys, to make them more viable as part of the exchange.
Yeah, and that those toys are equally exciting.
Yes.
So let's go to the second point of this here. When we make changes like this, it's important for us to make them at predictable times. And Adam's going to talk a little bit more about our communication strategy here in a bit. The start of a season is an especially good time for meta changes to happen because there's a big refresh, everyone is rolling new characters, and there's new seasonal content, right? And changes like that will also appear in Eternal at the same time.
What poses an issue here is that I get that they want to make changes, and this should be predictable for the start of the season. But when you make a change like that, if you want to make a change that's going to be detrimental to characters, and you're doing it because of the way a season is, so like the Malignant Hearts, for instance, I just picked up a Malignant Heart that I can't wait to socket into a piece of jewelry that I have. It's like 16% chance or something like that for a core or basic attack to fully restore your primary resource. That is awesome. That is wicked. So if they think that that's going to be overpowered, I can understand them nuking some players because of how powerful some of this stuff's going to be. Problem is, this wasn't just the season. This was across the board. Eternal Realm. It completely screwed the Eternal Realm. So, Eternal Realm. So they need to maybe possibly focus on, if they want to do changes like this, then these changes need to apply only to the season that they are trying to make new changes, to accomplish a different, just a different meta, a different thing. So, yeah, nothing more to say right there.
And the third point here, as Joe alluded to, there are certain situations. We saw a case where we had a skill that could do 10 to the 37 damage. In cases like that where the damage is literally breaking the game,
which I'm pretty sure they're talking about Bone Spear, because I think there's like one player that one-shotted Uber Lilith or something like that. I believe that's what they're talking about. They're not going to say it, but
or crashing the servers, we'll still react to those situations. But that doesn't change the first point here in terms of allowing builds to be overpowered. And I think, one of the things that's important for to recognize and state is that ultimately ARPGs, or some people call them hack and slash games, are about power fantasy, right? And they're about us inviting players to break the game to some extent, not to crash. There are lots of ways to interpret the word break, but
let the players break the game. You all don't need to do that for us. It's a hack and slash. Yeah, let us go and rip stuff up, man. Don't take that power away.
And find fun toys that we've made, do crazy things with them.
Speaking of fun toys, I really do hope they bring up the Oculus, because I don't understand their decision making on this random teleportation thing. Yeah, hopefully they'll get to the uniques that they're going to be having.
And we need to make sure that we aren't trying to punish players for doing that. Because ultimately that's the playground we built. That's we built a game that's go find crazy stuff. And we need to make sure that when players take that invitation, that we're not punishing them for that.
That's right.
Yeah, and I know when we were talking about at least the Nightmare Dungeon stuff beforehand, and we can go into it in a little bit more detail once we get to the stuff that might be coming down the pipe here. The one thing I think that I wanted to really highlight on was, obviously we did this patch and we made these changes and we brought character power down, player power down essentially. That in itself was also supposed to be paired with these Nightmare Dungeon changes that where Joe was actually talking about earlier, and it's something that we've learned throughout this process is, as you guys were talking about, that we have ultimate visions for something that is further down the line, and doing that all together at once during those moments, as opposed to doing them over time and whatnot, just leads to a better experience overall for players. And that's something that we most definitely will be doing as we build out future updates and patches and so forth. Of course, a key component to this is how we communicate to players, and there is been a lot of feedback in regards to hey, it would have been great if we knew some of these changes were coming down the pipe, and it's a hefty amount of patch notes. We could have digested this over a few days beforehand or a week beforehand. So one thing we do want to commit to right now is that we do plan on going forward always providing patch notes and communicating these.
So yeah, they communicated some of the patch notes, only the positive ones. They talked about how some of the positive changes coming to the season were also going to apply to the Eternal Realm, and that's why people were stoked for the patch to come out 2 days early, so that we can play them on the Eternal Realm, such as the Hell Tides, the chest dropping, having chance of dropping uniques, and certain other aspects. That's the one on top of my head right now, but there was just certain things that was going to be really, really cool to have. So they omitted it all, every single detail of the negative parts of this patch. It's mind-blowing.
These patch notes through streams like this, through Campfire chats or developer update live streams beforehand, well beforehand, at least a week before the actual update hits. in no matter state, because I know sometimes we're still like trying to like maybe potentially squeeze in a few different things into patch notes and stuff like that up until like the last second, just on the nature of production of how we are. But I will say we do plan on sharing those no matter what to the community going forward, and from here on out through a stream or written through blog or something like that beforehand, well beforehand, before players can actually get into game and actually try it out on their end. So at least we can hear feedback and you guys can actually digest the information beforehand. In fact, we do actually have, of course, future updates here that we do want to talk about here really quickly. But one thing that we will commit to right now is that next Friday, so exactly 1 week from now, we'll be back on a live stream, because we will start with that live stream where we will be talking about our next patch that will be coming to Diablo 4. We'll talk a little bit about some of the details here, but we'll go into more detail next Friday specifically. But we will be back on here to kind of go through the whole entire patch notes with everyone beforehand, so everyone has a better expectation of what they're going to be seeing in the actual update, and they can talk to us through chat, through devs, or through social media, through Reddit, through our forums, etc. beforehand, before the actual patch hits. So we will get times and remind everyone, of course, throughout the week that we will have another Campfire chat to talk about patch 111, since we just shipped 110, 111. But we do want to talk a little bit about patch 111 today, just because there are some items that we are aware of that we know will be of interest to players, specifically when it comes to things that they've been asking for, and at least it gives you guys a little bit of an early preview of some stuff that's coming down the road. I think one big thing that everyone has been kind of talking about as of late from this current patch is like some of the sorcerer and barbarian items and stuff like that, and how we've obviously tuned a lot of classes down, and there's questions of like, hey, is there any changes in the future for those two?
Yeah, we're taking a long look at a lot of the sorceress and barbarian aspects that aren't being like utilized very well right now, and trying to lift a lot of those back up. So there's going to be a wide range of like legendary power and unique item improvements for these two classes in particular. We're taking a look at a lot of things, but we're really honing in specifically on sorceress first, and then also getting a lot of barbarian updates in there at the same time. And this is for 1.1.1.
Correct.
So the very next patch and cycle.
Yeah, and we expect that patch. Obviously, if we're having a live stream now, next Friday, we expect that patch here in the next like couple weeks or so. So at least you guys can get an early preview on it.
Yeah, and on that Friday, we'll be talking a lot about like the specifics of all of those changes, and kind of hearing what the community says.
Yep.
It feels like
in fact the Nightmare Dungeon items that we were just talking about just now, that's actually we're planning on actually rolling that out in a hotfix specifically, and that is something that we actually plan on rolling out later today. So we'll have more information on the Nightmare Dungeon changes that will be that we talked about earlier, that will be coming out later today via hotfix. Another big.
So if you're talking about like all the control stuff that happens to our characters, such as the smoke screen thing and getting froze and all that stuff, that's a welcome thing. So I look forward to that. It doesn't sound like they're going to roll back any of the defense issues, but we'll have to see what happens.
Big thing that we've talked about in patch notes, because we've toned it down, and now we're kind of and we had mentioned that to players that we did plan on bringing it back up. It is monster density in Nightmare Dungeons and Helltide. So I know that you guys had some plans and so forth related to that.
Yeah, so I mean, going back to the mission statement I mentioned earlier, a key part of the live game is having high density areas for players to mow down, right?
Key part of ARPGs, right?
Of which Diablo 4 is one.
That's true.
Pardon my grammar.
Keep in mind, they're going to make it more dense now after our defenses have been stripped. It's comical. Come on, you gotta have a laugh at that.
And so we're going to be increasing the density in Nightmare Dungeons substantially. And we're going to be increasing the density in Helltide as well. Now, with the Nightmare Dungeon changes across the board for Nightmare Dungeons, all Nightmare Dungeons will get more dense. The Helltide change, there are certain areas of Helltide that are extremely dense, right?
Yeah.
Like the tar pits,
Tar
for
pits.
example, is very dense. Areas like that probably won't get more dense. And part of what we've been doing here at the same time in terms of these density changes is making sure that we're making performance improvements, like looking at player skills that are taking a lot of time on the servers, getting those into better performance so players have better frame rates and stuff, and fewer stalls and all these kinds of things that make the game more fun to play. And this also helps us increase the number of, like, more monsters, more players, more stuff going on. And we know that the density in Nightmare Dungeons in particular needs to go up. And so we've been working on that to make sure that we can accomplish that. So density.
Yay, so we don't have to worry about blind burrows as much anymore, right? Hopefully, because it's hard to find blind burrow drops that aren't crap. Like, so many bad affixes to them and stuff like that. So hopefully this will fix our infatuated need to have blind burrows dropped.
In Helltide will go up, not uniformly. Density in Nightmare Dungeons will go up uniformly, and these will be substantial increases.
Yep. Which I know players have been talking about constantly.
Yeah.
Wanting additional density on this.
Right,
specific.
rightly so.
And a big topic right now is inventory concerns. We've heard from players. I know we've talked about gems and so forth actually becoming materials in Season 2, which to help out with some inventory concerns specifically. I know you guys have information, at least in regards to stash, and what might be coming in 1.1.1.
Yes. So certainly the gem change is still coming in Season 2, like you said, but
That's actually a very welcome change, because them gems, man, you start picking up a bunch of crap and it's just sucks to have your inventory completely filled up like that.
we need more stash help now, right? And so in 1.1.1, we're going to be adding an additional stash tab for players so they can store more aspects, more Malignant Hearts.
Yeah, this has been like an ongoing conversation every week inside the dev team of like, do we feel that we're ready to do this yet? Do we feel that we're ready to do this yet? Like the density conversation and the stash tab conversation. Like the engineering team's been working really, really hard to be able to like make these adjustments possible for us. Like there's more that we're doing. This is now a never-ending conversation of like what else can we do and what else can we be doing to try to improve the experience? But like we've definitely heard these two concerns, and we're just really happy to be able to bring them in as early as 1.1.1.
Yeah. Oh, and I should mention that along with the stash tab, we're making a small change to Elixir stack size. We're going to bring that up to 99. So that'll help a little bit.
That's a very welcome change, actually. That's a very, very welcome change.
Awesome. Obviously, like with new starts to seasons, and if we do have these types of changes that occur within the patch that may change, whether it's the meta or the balance of specific things, there's been questions related to respecs and how that has been pretty expensive on people's like their own personal economies with gold and so forth. I know we have respec changes that are also coming with the game. It's
Definitely made gold valuable in this game. Like all the other Diablos out there, like 1, 2, 3, whatever, gold was no issue. You had gold. If you died, you lost your gold most of the time. At least this time you don't do that. But yeah, having to respec and all this extra stuff that requires all this gold to use, it's gold's valuable. So it'd be nice if they reduce the cost of that respec, because when you have to change an affix on one of your items through the cultist, that does get pretty pricey. So it'd be nice to save your gold for that instead.
itself. You guys probably know more specifics on the numbers.
Yeah, I mean, this really goes back. Joe was talking about our commitment to choice earlier, And it also, but I think it also goes back to, when we say in the mission statement, we want to have a wide variety of viable builds. Great, but if you can't switch between those builds, then it still feels punishing, right? So we're going to bring respec costs down by about 40%, quite a bit.
Cool. Yeah, so it should help out with people
That's
that
awesome.
Want to switch over to a
That's
different
awesome.
build and so forth, or they do have to adjust over to another build. They get the option of actually being able to do so, or have an easier option of being able to do so.
And that'll be in 1.1.1.
And that'll be in 1.1.1 as well. So, and then I know, lastly, like one big thing is, as players kind of progress through the game and the leveling curve kind of goes through, especially like post like 70 or so, we've been looking at the player journey and how they've been getting up to 100. I know there's some changes that you guys are looking at in terms of like experience.
It takes forever to do that now, and the problem is not only does it already take a long time, but they decreased all the experience. It was like 3 levels above you, and you can get like 25% extra experience. Now it's like 3 levels above you, you get 4.5 extra, and then I think up to 7 levels above you, you get what 15% or something like that. It's ridiculous. Like, ouch, man. They please fix that.
And so forth from that end.
Yeah, I mean, the short version is we want to make leveling from 50 to 100 faster by adjusting XP. I don't know if you have.
Yeah, I
robust
realized when
thoughts on that.
I was realizing when I was talking earlier about the changes we made. Obviously, we also made the change to XP gain when fighting creatures above your level, and I failed to mention this discussing it.
Yeah.
So the original intent for that was we found players basically sitting at like fighting creatures like 3 levels above them and never felt like they were really challenging themselves beyond that. We wanted to stretch that out a bit further, but that went from a 25% bonus to a 15% bonus. And we knew that density changes were coming online, so we thought about this a little bit. But I read a lot of feedback, like afterwards in particular, that just made it sound like people thought that we were just trying to make the game take longer, which wasn't actually the goal. But realized that the 25% to 15% change did constitute a nerf. As a result of that, it's the thing that we're thinking about as
Massive.
well.
Massive.
We are not trying to slow down the game.
No, and to that point, like we have a vision for how long we want the game to take for players. We realized that it's taking a little bit longer than that, than what our vision was originally for a lot of folks that are leveling up, particularly when they get to certain parts of the game, like when they're World Tiers 3 and 4.
Yeah.
So we are looking to like really to readjust the XP rates for those areas, because we aren't looking to like have you hit this absolute brick wall when you hit like level 70 or something, right? Like there's not like these moments where you're going to feel like you just can't, or 75. Like we don't want you to have this feeling that you just can't make meaningful progress, that we're just artificially holding you back. That's never been the vision or the goal, right? It ended up working out that it wasn't the players weren't just earning XP at the rate that we had originally expected. Is what it really came down to. So these are like we are making changes in this regard to kind of bring this down a bit. Yeah.
And I mean, you've seen certainly we did things.
Hopefully that means that probably not today, but like on next Friday when they release their next patch out. Hopefully that the XP will be brought back up. I know they say the monster density is going to be there, but you don't want to fight a whole lot more monsters. Take more time in the dungeon. Feel squishier playing because the defenses are low. Just to gain the same XP that you would have without the extra monster density and without being harder. So I'm really hoping that they increase the experience at the same time as they do the monster density. That would be very helpful.
Things like increase the XP bonus for Nightmare Dungeons a while back quite substantially.
Yeah, and Whisper Completion, Helltide chests. Yeah.
Now, notwithstanding that, there are changes to XP related to addressing, the power leveling case, because we don't have like group up, have fun with your friends, like power leveling each other.
Power leveling has been part of Diablo since Diablo 2. Diablo 1, I don't believe it was an online game, so it didn't matter with Diablo 1, but since Diablo 2 and up, power leveling has just been there. It's part of the gameplay. It's part of the hack and slash. It's part of the whole Diablo experience. So for them to rip that away is like, why, dude? Nobody wants to sit there and level from 1 to 100 on every single character they've done once they've gone through the game to begin with. You need to get the experience. You need to learn how to play your character. You need to know how to maximize your play style. But you can do that later on. And once you hit like 60, 70, you know, even 50 really, like once you got your skill tree completely maxed out and then you go into your Paragon board, um, at that point you want to play your character anyway. So even if you got power leveled up to that point and you plan on power leveling still, um, your buddies aren't online or whatever, you just want to go on your own, not power level, just level up like you would normally. You're gonna figure out how to do those things regardless of, um, the fact that you've hit 100 already or 70 or whatever. So you're gonna figure that out on the way. So they need to really not be so salty about the power leveling. It's part of the Diablo universe.
The only case that we think is not very fun is the case where one person is standing at the entrance to the dungeon and the other person is having all the fun killing monsters.
Yeah.
I can agree there. It's kind of lame. It's blah. I mean, it's part of the power leveling. I get it, but that's where you get up and get just something to eat real fast. Say, I'll be right back, let's see what they have to say about it.
And so, when we look at the balance of the XP changes in 1.10, we think that additional changes need to be made to make the game faster, especially between 50 and 100.
Yeah, we want level 1 to 100 to feel like an achievement, but not like a job.
Yeah.
Right? So like we want to make some adjustments, make sure that it feels fun, very achievable, obviously within the season timeline. But yeah, so we are going to make some adjustments. We'll be talking about more probably next week in terms of with more specificity.
Yes,
yeah.
very soon.
Yep. So again, we'll be back on stream next Friday to talk about all the details of the changes, including the barb and like sorcerer changes that Joe had mentioned, along with other changes that we are preparing right now for the patch itself. That patch itself is supposed to be hitting in the next couple weeks. Obviously, if we're doing the stream on Friday, it means it's coming pretty darn soon for after that stream. So, but we did want to make sure that we got in front of players to actually talk to them about everything, and we plan on doing that going forward if we ever have one of these larger patches that actually make some pretty significant changes within the game. We'll either get in front of you guys via stream or we'll end up
significant and horrible
posting about them earlier so that you guys get a better idea of what's to come for those. I know that we do want to take a bunch of questions actually from chat and so forth. I know one big question that has always kind of come up has been about leaderboards and so forth within, and the expectation of when those might be coming in. I know that ideally we're aiming.
What about the trade system? That's a question I would love to ask myself. And stay tuned for the next video, because I don't know if it's just going to be myself doing it, or I know Lance has been talking about getting on as well to do this. We've got a bit to talk about with how Diablo's material aspect of the game is. So make sure you like the video. Well, you don't have to like this one unless you want to, but subscribe and hit that notification bell, and you'll know when that video comes up. I'm hoping we can get it done this weekend. So
for season 3 for the leaderboards in itself. I don't know if you guys have any like additional information or like additional insight onto those from your end.
Yeah, so one thing that's really important to us for leaderboards in Diablo 4 is that we don't think that like tying this directly to Nightmare Dungeons or content type exactly like that is going to make a lot of sense, because the variety of the nature of the system. So we want to make a content type that kind of partners directly with leaderboards, so that you can be judged in kind of like this kind of more even playing field when you're going through that experience. But that is content that we are actively in development on and are excited to try to get ready for season 3. So we're going to be making I'm sorry. The short answer to this is so we excited about our competitive feature. We are making a specific content type that goes alongside that you're judging yourself against, and we're looking for season 3 for that.
Question from You Stupid Walrus. Is Uber Uniques, what's the future? They mathematically don't exist, so I don't think it's a good waste of resources of them anymore.
Sorry, I was really distracted by the walrus.
Okay.
Can you read the question again?
Uber Uniques.
Oh, right.
What's the future? They mathematically don't exist, So I don't think it's good to waste resources on them in the future.
Yeah, that's a good question. So,
Agreeable.
Uber Uniques are designed such a way that they are a huge spike of power, and we're receiving feedback, and we understand the feedback on some of them. But they represent a huge spike of power, and as such, are not expected to be part of builds necessarily. One of our goals underlying is we don't want players to feel that one of these are mandatory that you must find in an effort to bring your build online. From the ground up, we kind of made the decision to say it is okay if we want players to find these, but we don't want them to expect to find these. Which is a difficult place to balance in terms of drop rates when you're thinking about these. Now, right now, I believe that they are exceedingly rare, and we do want them to feel very, very rare. But I suspect that as we start moving into future seasons, we do want to find more ways for players, or more opportunities for players to get chances at these. And I imagine we'll be able to talk about that soon. But I would suggest that the current drop rates are probably not going to be the drop rates forever. We'll probably make those a little bit more common, a little more likely to be found as time goes on.
A big topic that I'm seeing just pop up in chat and so forth. A lot of comments about crowd control.
Sure,
If there's any plans or ways that we're looking at addressing crowd control here in the future.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier in the stream, or well, I think we both talked about it. We think that when you have high density of monsters on screen and you have a lot of elites, the crowd control, the tools that you have for crowd control are not, need to be better, basically. And
Completely agree with that statement. It definitely needs to be better, especially when the monster's crowd control to us is, to say the least, very overwhelming sometimes, even for a really good player. They're talking about decreasing our cooldowns, even the cooldowns that are on our unstoppable moves, our escape moves, the ones to get us out of a sticky situation. You get out of that and then you're instantly controlled again to the point where you just can't move. Freeze, 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 kill. I mean, it sucks. So at least he agrees with that. So I'd like to hear that.
some of that is going to be adjustments to things that feel unfair, and some of that is going to be tool adjustments in terms of your tools. I think that we'll be able to, this is something that we'll be able to speak more to in terms of specifics and how we're going to address that, but we agree it's a problem in the future. Yeah.
Question from I'm so bad. IK Recoat. I tried. I'm so bad with names. I'm sorry. When will loadouts be added?
Yeah, it's a feature that the UI team is very excited about.
So that's another thing that I've noticed, because back in the day, you could actually have two sets. You've got your one set of armor, and then you can press a button, I think, on your inventory screen, and it would swap it to another complete set of armor. So most people would run that for PvE and PvP. This is something I've been waiting for. If that's what they're talking about with the loadouts, I'm assuming it's not like a loadout like Call of Duty where you can go online and, go to your stash and you've got this whole loadout there and you're ready to equip it. I'm hoping it's something you can equip on your character out on the go. And then let's say you want to go from fighting a dungeon to immediately go to a PvP area, or if not even that, you can just do a skill swap. So, you're running an ice sorceress or a whirlwind barbarian or whatever, and you're getting into a party that already has a whirlwind barbarian and an ice sorceress. Then not only can you switch your gear around by the click of a button, but you can also switch your skill set around to become something different. So now you're a electric sorceress or sorcerer. And now you're I'm not entirely sure all the barbarian ones, but I'll find out soon. But you get what I'm saying. You want to have the option to be able to join a group and not be discluded because you're running the same stuff as someone else is. So we'll see what they have to say here about that.
About and something we've talked about a bit internally. We don't have a timeline for the idea of
Sorry, my mouse was...
loadouts. just yet, but it is something that we're continuing to actively talk about. When we have more information to share in terms of like when something like this could potentially be added to Diablo 4, I'm sure that we'll talk about it.
Barag Zero says, what is the time frame on 111? It doesn't seem very clear. Is it before the middle of the season? How long do I need to wait for Sorcerer and Barbs to have their changes and be playable? It is
What they were saying earlier, it sounded like 111 was going to be next Friday when they have their talk, but I'm guessing not. So
much sooner than mid-season. As I said, it's only like a couple weeks away, and by a couple weeks, I mean like very, very soon. Like if we're doing a stream on Friday, I would expect it within a couple days after the stream.
We have to provide some.
that's not.
If we say anything too specific today, production will choke us out. So we have to be very careful about the language we use. But yes, very soon.
Only because with patches themselves, of course, there are. We're on a lot of different platforms and everything, and of course those go through certification. If a certification gets pushed back or whatnot, then we obviously need to readjust schedules, so it's hard for us to actually put a specific time on to, until that actually occurs. But very, very soon. BaldBeast79, are there any plans for some changes for experience?
Some of these people in their names, man, y'all got to make a fake account or something like that and come back and ask these guys, because come on, this this guy's having a hard time holding a straight face by just saying what your username is.
Between, say, level 75 to 100. This is actually something that we just commented on, but the journey feels a bit dull. There are several events, but only nightmare dungeons to provide challenge. World bosses, Hell Tides, and Whispers are a good idea, but just too easy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's so we talked about, so I guess there's two real parts of this. Like, are we making changes to the XP progression for players while they're moving through, like World Tier 4 in this case? And the answer is yes. We are going to be looking at making changes to that, and we'll talk more about that soon. Mm-hmm. And then secondly, do we feel that there are the right number of milestones for players to engage with? Enough goals to kind of consume while you're also just leveling up, and enough content to kind of do as you're leveling up in these world tiers? And I think that the answer is no. That we know that there's more things that we need to add to the game, particularly for World Tier 4. But really, just once you get into World Tier 3 and 4, just find more opportunities and more content and new things for players to do as they're leveling up through those spaces. And we do have plans for those things, and we do have thoughts on stuff we want to add in Season 2 in particular, and some things we're looking to continue to talk about moving forward. Yeah. But yeah, we recognize that there's more we would like to add to that journey to kind of create more variety and more moments of challenge as well while you're progressing, and not just at 100, but all along the way.
Podoc24 says, what are your plans to adjust loot drops? This, I'm going to add on to his question after I read it. It feels very frustrating to grind for days without ever seeing anything close to an upgrade or finding the right aspect. Even worse, when you finally do it and it's a terrible roll. Slightly, I'm also going to modify that and mention target farming, which has also been a topic within the community. I'm not sure if you guys want to have any plans and so forth for that.
So I think there's a couple parts of this as well, right? There's the idea of I grind for a long time to get an item, and the item is not an upgrade. And particularly, when you're in World Tiers 3 and 4, where you start dealing with sacred.
Yes, and I mentioned that earlier as well, because when you're going all day long and you get something that's either lesser than what you have, or it's just for something that's not part of your build, it's really annoying. So I'm glad they're touching base with this one.
Items and ancestral items, where you're kind of dealing with this larger bucket of eye power range, this can certainly tend to be true, unless you're looking for specific kinds of affixes, you're looking for particular kinds of roles, right? So there's a couple things. One, we know we want to try to reduce the difficulty of kind of comparing and looking at a number of different items all at once and trying to get a better sense of that. These are things the UI team is very passionate about, and conversations are ongoing in terms of how we want to achieve that. Things like loot filters, things like that. There's the idea of how does the progression of itemization feel, particularly in World Tier 4, while you're leveling up there. And the systems team has ideas on things they would like to include. It's too early for us to say exactly, to really lay them all out just now. But there are ideas and things we want to do to kind of improve the feeling of progression through the ancestral tier, so that you feel like there's more thresholds and there's more opportunities to kind of get upgrades as you go. And then lastly, there's this idea of target farming. So legendary aspects are a place I think that we can afford to do more we know that players are looking for certain aspects. They're trying to find certain things. They're trying to find particularly unique items. I think is often the case, right? They want their Tempest Roar, whatever it is they're looking for. They're looking for that thing. We do have plans in season 2 right now to have more content you can try to target farm in order to find certain unique items. And I think there's a natural extension of that to figure out like what's the right way for players to be able to find an easier method of getting at some of the aspects they might be looking for as they're progressing through. So that is something that the rewards and systems teams will be thinking about and hopefully we'll talk about soon on stream.
Yeah, and I do want to note, like, I know we have an update here coming for 1.1.1, which we just talked about is in the next couple weeks. There are going to be other patches before season 2 and so forth,
yes.
with additional changes and items that we just haven't noted, and I just want to clarify specifically on that. We do have more patches beyond 1.1.1 before season 2 to address a lot of feedback that we're receiving from players and a lot of opportunities for us to actually do so. Can we get some sort of matchmaking system to help with partying up with random people or group finders? I know we had talked about group finders before.
Okay, that would actually be a welcome addition if they did something like that, because unless you actually have friends already on BattleNet or, well, just BattleNet, PlayStation Network, Xbox Network, Live, it's kind of hard to find anybody. So people have to say, help, help, please help, yada yada with their emotes. So let's see what they have to say here.
I know this is something that the team has obviously received feedback about, like helping out with like the social systems and so forth within the game. It is being evaluated, I know, and the teams are looking at it. We just don't have an exact timeline of when those are actually coming in specifically from that end.
And that's fine as long as they're actually looking at it and they have thought about it. If it's something they're willing to work on, I'm okay with that. I can have some patience.
Are there going to be changes with arm? Oh, sorry, I forgot to. That was Andy for Man was the last question. BeanPot10 says, are there going to be changes with armor regarding survivability? Hardcore is almost unplayable on Sorcerer, with one-shots from corpse bows and low innate.
The Sorcerer is so squishy. I can totally believe this is true. And when I said earlier about me not having a barbarian, like not knowing the skill set, I just created one today that's on hardcore. Level 1, so I'm not going to progress with that until Lance is able to join with me, but right now we're going to be focusing on the season. So yeah, the Sorceress on hardcore is not something I would want to try.
Due to low innate armor.
Yeah, I think survivability, especially on Sorcerer, is something that the changes that Joe is talking about that we'll be talking about in more detail next week is one of the things we want to include in that. We recognize that.
Yeah, we also identified there are a few outstanding monster types and abilities that are killing players a little more frequently than we expect, and like we're looking at creatures that explode when they die, for example, claim an awful lot of lives, right? Creatures.
Those poppers, I call them poppers, are so freaking annoying. You get into a crowd and then you got the freezes, you got the poppers, like it's always something. You're either in the shadow, like the darkness that you can't see anything and you can't attack, and you got poppers running at you, or you got the freezing and you got the poppers. It's like poppers are everywhere and they are just so incredibly grr. Do something about that.
That can chill. Claim an awful lot of lives, right?
Or charging creatures, we've also learned.
And charging creatures, yeah.
I've seen a lot of reports about that, and I know, and you're about
which I think have been nerfed like twice now.
Well, there's a bug fix on the Beast Charge in particular, where Beast Charge could deal damage even if you interrupted the charge or the beast died.
Oh, I see. So, that's a good bug fix. So, I mean, we're identifying some of these like really, really difficult affixes, really, really difficult Nightmare Dungeon affixes, or like really ones that claim lots, like a disproportionate amount of player lives as part of that. And we're looking at those all at once. It's Sorcerer survivability is absolutely an issue, and we're going to be talking about it more in the 1.1.1 conversation next week. But there's also this idea of like there's a lot of things out there that are just doing a lot of like what feels to the player in the moment pretty cheap, like unfair, like just I sort of just died, don't really see what happened. So we're looking at more of these situations and trying to figure out the right places to make adjustments. We don't want the game to be easy. We don't want we don't want you to be able to walk through every encounter, and we want the game to feel deadly at times. We want you to feel like you have an opportunity to kind of evade or deal with those situations.
In regards to someone, Zeus DNA says we'll be seeing the hotfix notes before the hotfix comes out today. Yeah, we'll get the notes up. The deployment hasn't started and it's not starting until later this afternoon, but we'll get the notes up so that players can see it, and we'll be mentioning it so that players can actually read through them and so
I'd like
forth.
to know what's
This
in
is
there.
a pretty large hotfix in terms of like items that we're actually fixing and the Nightmare Dungeon stuff that we had just talked about.
Yep.
Templar Knights asks, question, can we change the codex in such a way that we can upgrade the values with founded legendary items? This could reduce the demand to stash, avoid aspects laying around, easier adopting player tier balance changes, but we still want to find items and increase codex values.
Yeah, so we know that one of the key things that players are carrying in their stash right now are lots and lots of aspects. And we're talking about ways to address that. That's an interesting suggestion. That I think it's sort of going toward the same direction here, which is like, how can we address the case where your stash is completely full of aspects? Certainly having an extra stash tab will not hurt that problem, but I think there's more that we'd like to do in terms of the aspects.
I think in general, we should have access to a lot more tabs in general than what we do. I did notice it looked like for the seasonal change. I don't know if this was across the board or if it's just the season, but the stash in the actual stash, not your inventory, it did look like it was bigger. It might just be me. I'm not entirely sure, but the ability to actually buy more tabs, I don't care if it cost 100 million gold. As long as if you had the option to buy more stash space, would be just excellent. Because again, they want us to be diverse. They want us to be able to try different builds out. Well, we don't want to build 4 level 100 sorceresses, 4 level 100 rogues, barbarians, necromancers, anything like that. I brain farted on the last druids. There you go. We don't want to have 4 level 100s of each one of those. So we need to be able to not only have the ability to switch between gear sets and skill sets, but we need the stash space to support all of that. So if they want, we're already limited to 10 characters as is, so we couldn't have 4 level 100s of a particular character anyway, of all 5 classes. So the stash is a major issue, and this is definitely something that I would like to see changed in the future, near or later. It's something that would be very, very welcome.
Yeah, it's certainly something we've been discussing internally for a while. I think part of this is just how much fun is it to be able to extract an aspect from an item and be able to maintain that role? And then how much is that fun so fun that it's worth some of the inventory pressure that comes about as a result of that? Yeah. That's a conversation we've had within the dev team. We're going to continue to talk about it, but we know that there's definitely a lot of improvements we can make to the Codex of Power, for example, to kind of be embracing some of these other affix extraction systems.
Question from DRJ16. Has the team considered how certain nerfs like weapon cooldown reduction are so much more impactful for certain classes than others?
Yes, the team is definitely aware that some of these changes disproportionately affect, the vulnerable damage change disproportionately affecting, like Cold Sorks. We're definitely aware that some of these changes disproportionately affect some classes and builds more than others. And this goes back to my earlier point about when we're going to be making changes like this moving forward, that we know we're going to have this have an overall effect of reducing certain effects down, or rather reducing certain powers or affixes or whatever it is down to a place where we want people to use the baseline to kind of build from for other parts of the game. That when we do those things, it's going to affect these different players in different ways, and they're not going to enjoy that if we've ruined their build in order to try to weed the garden and get things into a better place. Ultimately, we're going to be trying to do a lot more situations where if we're going to take a thing away, if we're going to update.
And right now they're all ruined. No one, like the rogue is not too bad, but most characters are just squashed.
Something where it's no longer going to be as valuable as part of your build. We want to provide a lot of other options as part of that.
Yeah.
Make sure we don't leave the build with a gaping like giant hole in it as a result of the change that we made. So this is going to, again, it's going to mean that moving forward when we're making like larger scale balance and tuning adjustments, we're going to do those a little bit more slowly as a result, in order to make sure that we're embracing all of these other like components to give a lot of options all at once when we make a change.
I appreciate that. And not that this video would get watched by this fella. I'm not laughing at him. I'm laughing at the whole idea of this patch that happened. And when he makes a comment like that, that's just been on my mind. I can't help but laugh about it. It sucks. But it does sound like they've recognized a lot of these issues and they're trying to fix it. So, sir, I appreciate that. Appreciate that very much.
Yeah, it goes back to the change we had on the screen before, right? We're going to provide compelling alternatives when you make those kinds of changes.
That's a punchy way to say it.
Punchy way. Kennywa says, question, why did you guys increase the cast time on stuff like leaving dungeons? Feels like you're trying to slow down the game by making us waste time for something that might feel useless.
We can look at that. We'll continue to evaluate that change. It's a fairly small difference. I know that in an ARPG, small amounts of time can be meaningful. We did add the reset dungeon button back in. It does require that you're outside the dungeon, and so there's kind of a loop there.
Loki5123 asks, are you going to add more than 6 or 7 items a season? Are there plans to add more? The feeling is they feel like they would want more items per season that are actually added in.
Yeah, we've always said that we wanted to take in the feedback from the players as we kind of got these seasons out the door. So season 1, we add the 32 Malignant Hearts, which I think have been pretty cool. We're going to be looking at the balance, some of them to kind of like lift them up, make them a little more exciting in some places. But broadly, we're pretty happy. They generally are. And then we have our uniques and our legendary items that we added with the season as well. I think if there is, if we see that there's like a lot of interest in trying to get more of these, we can start trying to think about how we can inject a few more legendaries into the game with each season, or a couple more uniques potentially into the game with each season. But we want to continue.
I was gonna say, we don't necessarily need more legendaries in the game. We need more uniques in the game, because I don't know about you, but I'm kind of tired of picking up Frostburns and the occasional Temerity had to paint the pants with the T in it. The boots, the Penitent Greaves. I mean, there's certain uniques out there that are just so freaking common to get. Like, we need that unique weapon drop more often. We need that unique chest piece, not the razor plate, drop more often. We need more uniques to drop that's going to be beneficial to our character that aren't always gloves and boots. So, yeah.
To see like kind of what the feedback looks like. This is a good example of people asking for more. So yeah, good to know.
Separately from that, like, are you guys looking at potentially like reworking or redoing some things?
So that means patch 1.1.1 is kind of in that vein of trying to like get these things into a slightly better place. And we do want to go back over our existing legendary power library and identify the ones where they can afford to be lifted up with redesigns and changing the way that some parts of them work, so they've better fulfilled the stated purpose in terms of where they're supposed to sit in builds. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities for that along the way as well. It's not going to be the only way we inject like new fun in the game isn't going to just be through the season mechanic, isn't just going to be through the addition of brand new legendaries uniques, but also going back over the existing legendary powers after we see players use them a little bit more, making adjustments accordingly.
Question from Panda Mousy and Mormra. Same question, actually. What's your plan for resistances? Right now, they feel like a wasted stat. Do we have any changes to resistances that might be changing maybe sooner or later, or how's that going to work?
Resistances fall in one of those categories where if we need to make a change to the way that resistance damage is, or rather, the way that players use resistance to mitigate damage from certain sources. And it's going to be a far-reaching change when we actually go through and make this, which means that we want to be able to take the time with it and do it properly. It's going to be, right now we plan to put that into Season 2 as part of a larger rework. So you can look forward to more information as we get a little bit closer to Season 2.
Shadow
And I'm fine with that because we do need better resistances. But what I don't want to see is I don't want them to take away certain attributes or fixes to, and I'm not talking about legendary fixes. I'm talking about what comes on your gear to begin with without it being legendary. You know, the yellows, the rares. Um, I would like to see them add resistances that are actually worth it to your gear without them removing other things that you need. So, if that makes any sense.
Shadow Mun, sorry. Can campaign bosses be added to the pool of dungeon bosses that we encounter? I feel like campaign bosses are underutilized.
And I have to agree with that because, you know, if you are someone that played Diablo 2, I don't know how old you are, who my viewers are, but if you are one person that played Diablo 2, how many times did you kill Mephisto? Just out of curiosity? I couldn't tell you for myself. That was like a big drop person. It was easy to get to, just an easy boss. It'd be nice if we could go back and re-kill these bosses that aren't just Lilith. Because not many people have a chance to really kill Uber Lilith. It's all about these nightmare dungeons and Helltide chests. So, yeah, let's see what he has to say about that.
I think there could be more opportunities to fight some of those campaign bosses in the future. I can't comment further on exactly how that will look, but I agree with that.
That's some good news.
Sounds good. Okay.
Joe has often said this, so like we definitely want to make sure we find the right ways to bring act bosses in. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is actually a question. Party Cannon 30. Hi there, guys. Can you? Thanks for the information. My question is about crashes on PlayStation 5. Is that a known issue? We are aware of some issues on consoles, specifically Xbox, PlayStation, like that may be having crash issues and whatnot from their side. I do want to note, like I know with 1.10. There was a bug fix towards a specific memory leak that the team was trying to identify and find, and they actually did find it, and it was addressed there. There was actually an additional fix in 1.11 because I've seen a lot of questions, whether on Reddit and so forth, about PC performance and so forth, and even on like just performance in general, that will be addressed there. And I know that the engineers here are still actively, troubleshooting and figuring out like specific situations that players might be running into. Of course, if you have like more information on those, please post in console bugs on our forums, and give as much information as possible, because a lot of those repro steps on our side are sometimes really difficult, and it helps our teams out, helps our QA teams out to be able to see if they can actually repro the same type of issues that players are having. Do you guys plan on introducing more ways? Oh, sorry, this is Mr. I don't want to butcher that.
Okay.
Do you guys plan on introducing more craft / modify gear? Currently, only gold has value, and only one stack can be rolled.
More ways to craft and modify gear.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Very
We do
nice.
want to add more options for players to kind of modify the items they're getting. What we have really in the preseason and now the season 1 state is still very like a baseline experience in terms of item modification. We are looking at more opportunities in the future to allow players to do more with their items. So
That'd
yeah,
be nice.
that is a plan for the future.
The Almighty Striker says, why does the Necrominions why do they take ability slots? It could be easily a different button. How many of Necrominion builds have beat Uber Lilith? Lots of questions about, is there, we already answered the drop rates for uniques and so forth. That was the second part of the question. But I guess the question mostly is about Necromancer minions and ability slots. Also, I saw other questions related to companions, whether they're Druid companions with wolves or Necromancer minions, if there's any changes or plans for those to actually potentially get a little bit more tweaked up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is something we do care about. One of the things that that sounded dismissive.
Yeah, we care about a lot of things, but go on.
What I was just trying to get to another point, which is there's some really cool stuff in some of the Malignant Hearts affects this in terms of like kind of getting credit for additional abilities.
Yeah.
And we do care a lot about the number of the sort of like ratio of ability to number of slots that it takes up, and making that as optimal as possible.
Yeah, that's right. We want to make sure that if you're going to play a necromancer and you're going to summon skeletons, that you are going to be. I mean, that takes up that's the weight of an ability. You know, like it's the same as having an active. You know, you need to like playing with it. It's going to take a little bit of space in your bar. You don't get that in addition to a bunch of other things. If you don't want to have skeletons on your bar right now, the idea you'd be sacrifice a lot of those skills in order to give you that extra space. And in terms of the viability of like minion builds at various parts of the game, there are some builds that are able to like get pretty deep into content, obviously, but I think there's still room for improvement in terms of like minion survivability and other conversations along those lines. That is something that's still happening. And then there was the other conversation, the question about druid companions, right?
Yeah, kind of similar to necromancer minions, and people were asking like, can that ever be a viable thing?
Yeah, I think possibly. We see players. Actually, there are a few players that run like literally all 3 companion skills and use that as part of the build that they'll go after for their druid. And I think if there's likely room here to do more with companion skills, whether it rises to the full level of like a complete like spec. I think is going to be interesting. But I know that there's people on the team that are very excited about trying to explore more of this side of the druid over time. But we don't have there aren't as many interconnecting points for the way that you interact with your companions right now, and the way that the skeleton army does for the necromancer, in terms of ways that you modify them and do more with them. So I think there's some groundwork we need to do to like provide a lot more options there, but something that the team's interested in. Yeah.
I'm gonna do one last question.
Yeah, that would be a welcome thing. I'm currently working on a druid again for the season. I got one up to like 60 or 70 on the Eternal Realm, but I wasn't happy with how I went. Plus, I named it Baloo from the cartoon. Wanted to remake it anyway, just so I could get a different name. So why not? But yeah, it would be nice to see them do something with the companions for the druid and make it more interactive. I agree.
Question here, which is, will there be better loot tables for like treasure goblins? Any alternate goblin types specifically for those?
Because they suck.
Yeah, I think we loved how many, D3 has like all kinds of
goblins.
There's like 10 different kinds of goblins, or 14 maybe. It's been a little while since I looked at that data in the editor. But we think that there's lots of room for there to be more fun goblin types in the future.
And in terms of the treasure.
So here's an idea for them. Instead of making like just random goblins, why don't they make, there's this goblin that can drop this. There's, there's the typical goblin that's good. It still drops goodies, and it has a semi-low chance of dropping a really good item up to a unique. Then they have the mid goblin per se that appears a little bit less often, and possibly a little harder to kill, a little bit more escapey. But could also drops more chance to drop better items than the other one. And a little bit higher chance, obviously, on a unique, and then maybe the ultra rare goblin that just that you hardly ever see, but if you do see it, you better strike it down. You want to have really good crowd control on it. You want to really be able to keep that thing from escaping, because it's just extremely good at getting away. But if you kill it and you manage to kill it, then you have like a guaranteed drop for unique, for instance. So doesn't mean you're going to get it, but if you can actually manage to kill it off, you have a guaranteed unique. That's something that would be pretty cool to see, actually. So probably not what they're thinking.
The treasure goblins have a tendency to provide. We actually I had a conversation with the lead designer last week talking about this. We are going to be making we are going to be buffing like legendary drop chance, for example, from items that will appear from treasure goblins. We do want them to be to feel a little bit more exciting when the moments they drop.
Legendary. I mean, So in the old Diablo games, legendaries were exciting to get, and until they just weren't. And the problem with Diablo 4 is that you can make any rare a legendary because of the fixes. That you can take them off, put them on, to another. You can strip a legendary down and put that affix onto another item and make it legendary now. While that's a cool feature and all, it's underwhelming when you get another legendary because it's like, is it really that good? Is it really worth it? You know, is it a legendary because this legendary item has some just wicked stats to it, or is it legendary because just the affix that was put on it? Is that legendary item the same rare that you found 20 other times in the game and it just has the same affix that another legendary item had, or not? So, it kind of takes the all away from legendaries, in my opinion, but it is what it is.
Awesome. Yeah. Cool. Well, I know we talked about a lot today. I just want to recap some stuff that we had mentioned today. Obviously, we've been hearing a lot of feedback regarding the patch, and we're telling you guys now that we completely hear you loud and clear. We don't plan on doing patches like this ever again, where we're not going to be essentially removing the fun in the player.
The smart move would be just to reverse the negatives. If they don't want to remove, if they want to keep in the nerf to the vulnerable to the crit, in any such attributes, abilities, skills, that's not really a skill, it's more like an attribute. If they want to keep that nerf in there, then so be it. But they need to at least give us back the survivability chance, because the survivability that they've stripped is just, it's absurd. So it would be nice if they actually took that and remove that part, like take that, revert that out of the patch somehow. Whatever you got to do a hot fix on it. Let us survive better.
Power from players drastically like this.
Yeah.
And if we ever do that for any type of class, like a build or whatnot, we'll make sure that there's always some really good alternatives for players to actually be able to try out a different build that will also be boosted way back up to kind of help out and give other options for players to actually kind of jump into. And we will ourselves do a better job of course, communicating back to the community. Again, what we're saying now is that we will be getting patches.
So the problem with that statement is, and I don't disagree with them to an extent, but based on what they were saying earlier with, having the options and having diversity and all these different ways we can build our characters, maybe I'm missing something, but I feel like they're going back and forth on, hey, we want this diverse, but at the same time, hey, we're going to strip one down and make something better to have you change it. If we're going to have options on our characters, then we need to have the option to freely feel like we can make a build that's fun for the way we want to play that character, and not just something that feels forced upon us by the game creators because they want us to try something different. There's websites out there with builds that has the perfect build for this, and they'll even tell you, well, this build's got this stats on it, this is the way you need to run it. You have this build over here. It's a fun build. It's not as potent as the other one is, yada yada, but it's fun to play. They have all that, and that's what I'm getting at. Like, if they want to make it diverse, then they need to make all builds actually level with each other and make them all equally fun to play. I'm trying a build right now on the druid that I just made that is, it's not as powerful as one that I could be using, because the one that I could be using that's more powerful is slow. It's so stupidly pulverized. All right, pulverized is slow to me. I'm a new druid. I'm like level 22 on seasonal, and it's just so slow. So I switched it over to whatever the other one is that it attacks faster. I switched over to that, and I'll go into that later on. But anyway, it would just be nice if they balanced it out without making people feel like they need to switch to a different class because it's more powerful.
Patch notes in front of the community way earlier in advance, whether through a Campfire chat or through like a blog of some sort or any type of communication, so that you guys can get a better chance at looking at patch notes beforehand, seeing any type of changes that might be coming down beforehand. Because I think communication was key here. I think you guys not seeing what we were planning on doing and us kind of giving that vision really affected a lot of the response from you guys. And I think if we just provided that over to everyone and gave a little bit more of a heads up, I think it would have helped a whole lot there from that specific situation.
I just realized, guys, with OBS running, that I'm kind of in Joe's crotch here. Please ignore that. I had no idea until I just looked at OBS. It is what it is, but nothing I can do about it now.
Well, also
Yeah,
keeping in mind. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think that's absolutely one part of it, and you were talking about it in a more full way. But I want to really make sure I hit on, like, one of the really great points of feedback that we've been seeing is like, why can you nerf things today and then buff things far in the future, right? And so what we're saying is, not only is there a change to communication, but we're also going to pair changes like that together, so that we don't have exactly the situation that players have called out as unfair.
Yep, most definitely. And of course, with 111 coming really soon, we are committing to another Campfire chat next week, next Friday. Probably the same time. We'll confirm. More than likely, it'll be 11 a.m. next Friday. We'll end up posting about the details over the next week, so that just as a reminder to the community. And there, we'll actually go through all the changes that we just talked about here into greater detail. Joe, I know, will end up providing greater detail changes on like the barbarian and sorcerer adjustments that we're going to be making based off of community feedback. And then, of course, we'll also be talking about just essentially everything in the patch notes for that. Patch 111 will be coming out in a couple weeks. With us having a stream next Friday, I anticipate it being very soon or shortly after the stream specifically. So, and again, we do have a hotfix today that we will be rolling out this afternoon. We'll be having notes related to that hotfix here really soon, and there's a lot of changes in there, including the Nightmare Dungeon changes that we talked about today. So, again, thank you guys for the feedback. We most definitely hear you loud and clear. You know, it's something that we wanted to address, and it's something very important for the team here, for us to actually address the community and talk to you guys more about it, and also change some of the ways that we were doing specific items or specific processes. So we really do appreciate the feedback. Of course, continue providing feedback to us. It's really important for the game itself and for us to make a better experience for the players out there. So thank you guys again for tuning in. We'll see you next Friday for the next Campfire chat to talk about patch 111 and all the changes that are coming up. Really appreciate it.
All right, you guys. Well, there's this live stream. Hope you all got something from that. I'll probably, if I'm home in time next week, I'll do the same thing, and I'll, record it and leave my own comments and concerns on there. But yeah, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. Like I said, I'm thinking that we might do another video this weekend. I can't promise that. I don't know. I've got somewhat of a busy day tomorrow, and of course the patch just released. So if we do make another video, it's going to be a little bit shorter one. Just talking about another thing about the game that I'm just not really pleased with, but I don't know if they have any plans of ever changing it. So yeah, if you made it this far, thank you so much. Very much appreciate it. Let me know your thoughts, concerns, all that in the comment section below. And with that said, I will see you all on the next video. Yeah, take care. Peace.